conference realignment was the storyline of the offseason. Perennial powers of Texas and Oklahoma will now join a already stacked SEC. Georgia has the best chance of winning the conference title right now, according to ESPN's FPI. The Big 12, if you remember, lost, as I just mentioned, Texas and Oklahoma, but they took on 4 schools from the Pac-12. That includes Utah, which is favored to win the conference, Colorado, which of course got plenty of attention last season with Coach Prime and his crew. And then the Big 10 moved west with the addition of USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. Washington made the CFP last season, but they lost quarterback Michael Penix Jr. to the draft, and now their head coach Kalen DeBoer is with Alabama, and USC lost Caleb Williams, of course, who was the #1 overall pick. Paul and Heather back here with us from SEC Media Days. And Paul, I'm going to go to you first because let's focus in on Lincoln Riley and USC. They're now in the Big 10. The Trojans are 19-8 under Riley, no Pac-12 titles, no CFP appearances, and quite a lot of disappointment last season. How much does Riley have to prove at USC this year?
I think he has an enormous amount to prove because, quite frankly, Jay, I think he's been a disaster. Let's go back 3 years. Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC. It was announced at this moment in time. What did Lincoln Riley do? He ran away. He did not want to deal with the Southeastern Conference at OU. He took what he thought was an easier course, so he goes out to Southern Cal. He takes Caleb Williams. Good first year, but since then, everything has gone wrong. I thought last year was one of the worst coaching jobs I have ever seen. Quite frankly, had I been the athletic director at Southern Cal, I would have fired Lincoln Riley because he's yet to show, after many years as a head coach, he knows anything about defense. He's gone through defensive coordinators. He just simply couldn't handle it. And now things are going to be 5 times worse in the Big 10. On top of that, a number of his top players are bailing out. This is a guy who owned LA for about a half a minute, and quite frankly, next year at this time, I think he'll more than likely be an assistant in the NFL if he's that lucky.
Oh my gosh, Paul, you just gave Lincoln Riley a haircut like yours. Holy cow. Listen, I don't think he ran away to USC. I don't think he ran away to USC. I think he took Caleb Williams to USC and saw the opportunity to build the Trojans back up to what they were in their glory days. That hasn't happened. Last year was a disappointment. I don't think it's been a disaster, but the one thing that you can do and what Lincoln Riley has done is realize where he comes up short and made adjustments. He brought in defensive coordinator Deanton Lynn. He made sure that they changed the way that they practice. He's putting a more emphasis and a commitment to helping the defense play higher level defense. And that's all you can ask for him at this point. Yes, going into the Big 10, they have to make the college football playoff this year, or people are going to be more on Paul Finebaum's side and say, hey, this guy might not be the answer. He might have to get out of here. But at this point, if he does make the college football playoff with a quarterback like Miller Moss, I call him Eminem, he's a really great player, or Jordan Maeva, then you're going to say he did this without Caleb Williams, and I think it restarts the media cycle for Lincoln Riley. I believe he knows that. He knows he's under a lot of pressure this year, but I wouldn't go so far as to say it's been a disaster.
The second half of last season, guys, felt like a complete disaster for me with Lincoln Riley. They started out 6-0. He fell apart down the stretch. His best win was by 1 point, maybe. Again, the only win, I should say, was by 1 point against Cal, who was 6-7, and their best win was against UCLA. It was a mess. They gave up a ton of points on the defensive side of the ball. And so earlier, Heather, I know you said for Alabama to be considered having a successful season, it's making the college football playoff, despite it being 12 teams this year. Do you feel the same about Lincoln Riley? What does he have to prove this year at USC?
I would agree that the pressure is on for him to make the 12-team college football playoff, and you guys can't see it. I'm glad Paul is a little bit further away over here in this room because he came out swinging, and I'm glad I wasn't standing too close to him when he did that. But he's right, and so much of it is about the defense. But here's the thing with the college football playoff and the selection committee and Lincoln Riley. We saw this before at Oklahoma. He had the nation's best offense and the worst defense, and he still made the college football playoff. So that's possible. But these guys nailed it. The defense has to be better. You mentioned the second half of the season last year. They gave up 42 points. And there were times where they were only scoring 20 points a game, which is also kind of puzzling considering they had Caleb Williams, right? So if they can put together the complete package and be a complete team under Lincoln Riley, they can make the college football playoff. But I'm telling you, Ohio State is the team to beat in the Big Ten right now. And that game against Oregon early in the season, that's going to tell us which team to take the most seriously in that conference, because Oregon right now is ahead of USC.
Listen, I respect both of you, and I think you've made some reasonable points, but I look at Lincoln Riley in totality, and quite frankly, I think he's a fraudulent elite coach. He's not an elite coach. He lived off of Bob Stoops' players at Oklahoma. He mastered the transfer portal, taking walk-ons and transfers and making them Heisman Trophy candidates. But there's so much more to college football, as all of you know, than offense, and he's never been able to get it. And that's why I've said what I have to say. And it has gotten so much more difficult. And I'm glad Heather mentioned Oregon. I mean, they're not even, with Oregon and Washington going to the Big Ten, that's the worst thing that could have happened to Lincoln Riley. And on top of that, he'll get exposed in the first game, not against one of the top teams in the country, but a very competitive team in LSU. So I appreciate everyone trying to prop this guy up like so many others have been doing for so long, but it's not going to happen. He's not going to the playoffs, and he's not going to survive Southern California.
Paul brings up a great point. Let's see what happens in that LSU game, because that's always a great measuring stick, and it's the kind of non-conference game that will help, in the committee's eyes on Selection Day, differentiate some of those teams competing for an at-large spot who didn't win their conference title. So that's an important game. It will help answer this question right off the bat.
Paul, last word.
I think ultimately it's the Big Ten is going to eat him up, and that's really, we can put Band-Aids, Robert and Heather, on new everything's new. Well, I mean, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. You can come up with the greatest defensive coordinator in the country, and you have to have the players, and you have to be able to have the system. And I just I don't believe in Lincoln Riley. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm just spitting out the truth. And he had that town behind him. That's the real tragedy here. He came into LA, one of the toughest markets in the country, with LeBron and the Dodgers and everything else. And he was the toast of the town. But one thing LA hates is a loser. And right now, I think Lincoln Riley looks like a loser.
On that note, we're going to say bye-bye. Coming up,
Oh
you're on
my
first.
God.
Give me something